It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, this is Ivy Slater, and welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. So I am truly thrilled and excited to have been connected to Gilda Squire. Anybody who's been listening to Her Success Story for a while know that in my heart of hearts, I'm all about the relationships we build and the connections we make as we do truly life. And Gilda was a gift to me in relationship building. Gilda is the founder of Squire Media and Management, Inc. That was started in 2008. So Gilda and I both started our companies in 2008, and we have a few other similarities as well. It is a boutique management and PR firm overseeing the career and groundbreaking ballerina Misty Copeland, which has resulted in several endorsement deals, film, book, and television projects. And I was just scrolling the other day and I saw an interview with Misty. The firm also manages public relations for actors such as Courtney B. Vance, who portrayed Johnny Cochran in the FX series People vs. O.J. Simpson, also Angela Bassett, as well as many others. Prior to founding Squire Media and Management, Gilda served as the director of publicity at HarperCollins Publishing, where somehow I'm sure our paths had crossed there also back from my printing days. And she was responsible for overseeing publicity and book tours for the corporation's imprint, as well as several titles under the publisher's flagship HarperCollins imprint. I can go on and on. Gilda received a variety of awards over her years, but more important of me talking about Gilda, let's talk with Gilda today. So thank you for joining me here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Ivy, for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk to you.
So I know somehow in our last 20 plus years, we were probably standing next to each other at some coffee shop in New York and didn't know each other.
Exactly. Everyone thinks that New York City is this behemoth of a place, and it is. But I like to describe New York City as this little village of people who go about their daily lives. They work hard and they play hard. And so, yeah, I would imagine we have probably been in some wonderful cafe or coffee shop or tea shop at some point together.
So let's go back and start at the beginning, the beginning of your journey, because early on your life had some interesting twists. And like many of ours, we set that dream of we're going to, right? And I remember my dream was to be a dancer, and blew out my knee at 23. And there was even other things that got in the way of that. And our dreams don't go away, but they shift and change and get adjusted over time. So what was your early on vision, and how did that end up adjusting and changing for you?
Well, I honestly wanted to be a lawyer. And, from as long as I can remember, my mother was very clear about one thing: if nothing else, you're going to college and you're going to get your degree. That was just not an option. And so that's the way I lived my life. I was a really serious student. I enjoyed school. I loved going to class. I loved learning new things. I loved learning with other people. I literally felt like learning gave me life. And so it was always my understanding that, I'm going to graduate high school and I'm going to go to college. And we were living in rural Virginia, in Caroline County, Virginia. And I wanted to go to New York University, believe it or not. That was my dream school. But I also discovered George Mason University as my dream school. And so unexpectedly, my mom died when I was 15. And that changed everything. My father, who passed in 2021, my father was not the you must go to college parent. He was the you need to get out and get a job. And so a lot of my opportunity to go to college just sort of dissipated and disappeared during that period. And it happened relatively quickly because I learned that I wasn't going to be able to go while I was in my last year of high school, because I skipped junior year and went straight from sophomore to senior. And so I had to figure out what to do with my life. And it ended up taking a very circuitous route, but my first job ended up being at the FBI at 16.
I had no clue the FBI hired 16-year-olds back in the day.
You know, it was interesting because I was 16. I was out of high school. I qualified for the job as a clerk typist. At that time, I think I was typing, if not over 100 words a minute, it was 100 words a minute. And so, you know, I was eligible to work. So they did hire me, but they did make it a big deal, like, you're only 16. And so I stayed at the FBI for about 3.5, almost 4 years. And then I moved because I didn't know when I graduated early at 16 that I wasn't going to be able to just go out on my own, even with a job, because I was technically still a minor. And so, you know, about 3 years, 2.5 years into it, I went on a special assignment to the Washington Metropolitan Field Office. And I realized, like, oh my goodness, you know, the Richmond Field Office, which is where I was working, was this small environment. And I went to Washington. It wasn't the bureau, which is headquarters, but it was the field office. And it was like amazing. I had all of these great opportunities, meeting all these people. That was my number one lesson, my first lesson in networking, because it was through that networking, even if I didn't understand what it really was that I was doing, it was through that networking that led me to my next opportunity, which was working at the FBI at the Washington Metropolitan Field Office, which then led me to working on Capitol Hill with the Office of Technology Assessment. So it was circuitous, but I made it work, and I was learning a lot along the way.
And I will say a couple of things, you know, you bring to mind. And I said, you know, from the time we started speaking a while back, there's so much in alignment, because I remember with a college degree, the first thing I had to do was take a typing test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, it was an hour, and I'm throwing you under the bus a little bit. I think you're a little younger than me, but back in the time, you know, it was the number one requirement of getting out of a job, of getting out of any piece of education, high school or college.
Yes.
For a woman, is the first job entry was a typing test.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I agree with you 1,000%. We were networking without the word connected to it, that we had no idea.
We had no idea. And, you know, the thing is, that's why I really impress upon young people now, and even people who are in that sort of mid-career point. Networking is so important, and mentorship is so important. I did not know that that's what was surrounding me at that point. I had this amazing, small, intimate group of women who saw potential in me, and they were the ones helping to push me. When I was working on Capitol Hill, my boss, who is no longer with us, Dr. Gibbons, I worked for the director of the Office of Technology Assessment, and I'm surrounded by all of these brilliant people in technology and energy. And he just said to me one day, he called me in his office out of the blue, and he said, you know, Gilda, you've got to go back to school. And, you know, at that point, I'm like 20, 21 years old. I'm doing very well for my age and for my stage.
You're doing beyond a 21-year-old woman at that time. And absolutely. I hate to classify it that way, but this is not recent.
No. And
I'm not calling you old, because I think I'm damn young. So.
But no, absolutely. I was doing, I had my own apartment. I had my car. I was in my.
You were successful.
Caroline County, Virginia. I was successful, but he saw more in me, and he said, you must go back to school. You must get your degree. And so he threatened to fire me if I didn't do it.
Wow.
And so he left me with no choice. It was an ultimatum, like, either you go to school or you don't have a job. And so I took him up on it, and I applied to George Mason, which, remember, was one of my dream schools when I was in high school, and I got in. And the big surprise for him, he thought I was just going to go part-time and, you know, take some classes. And I said, no, I'm all or nothing. So I'm going to continue to work here full-time because I need my benefits, but I'm also going to go to school full-time because I just need to dive into this. So I took a full class load at George Mason, which is in Fairfax, Virginia.
Yep.
And I also worked full time for 3.5 years.
I could probably take a deep breath, because that had to be that's a massive commitment. And God bless that you were 21, so you had the energy to do it at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
I mean, but it also kind of laid the foundation for me being able to understand the importance of being able to prioritize and multitask, because in what I do, that's incredibly important.
right. Well, and I have to say, so I'm going to rephrase that. I have to ask, starting in with the FBI, you could have built an amazing career with benefits and an exit program, right? And that wasn't enough for you. You went on and dreamed bigger. How did that come about?
You know, this is one of those stories where, and I'm going to try to condense it. When I went back to school, to George Mason, during that time, as if this wasn't enough of a full-time job and full-time work class load, a friend of mine at the time who was going to Howard University, she decided that she wanted to start a magazine on La Noir. Now, this is before the whole multiculturalism tag and diversity and all. She wanted to start a magazine that celebrated people of color in all of our beautiful shades and colors and shapes and sizes. And she said, why can't we do that? Why can't we do that? And so she asked me to come on board. She said, well, you love to write. Why don't you help write some of the articles? And I said, oh, sure. You know, as if I have lots of time. I didn't. But I said, oh, sure. And then somehow I applied, because my office at OTA on Capitol Hill was right beside our Congressional and Public Affairs office for the agency. So I had a bird's eye view of what they were doing at what we called CPA, where they were doing press releases and interacting with the media. And so I said to her, I said, you know, we need to get the word out about what you're doing. This magazine is going to be really special, and we should do a press release. I mean, when I think back to how I my brain sort of wrapped around this, and that's what gave birth to me being interested in PR and public relations, was, hey, you know, friend, let's do a press release to help promote your magazine. And then all of a sudden I fell into sort of like the public relations person for this very new magazine. And then that's when I sort of changed my major to communications with a focus in PR.
And so when you graduated college, what was your next path and your next courses of action?
So believe it or not, I had decided while I was doing this with my friend, this sort of outside internship, I called it, with my friend, I decided I wanted to work in the music industry. So I moved to New York after graduation, or after I finished classes before graduation, to focus on getting a job in music on the PR side. And I got great offers from their standpoint, but I was sort of in a different position, because I was coming from this, what I considered to be this full body work experience already, working on Capitol Hill and the FBI. And they really wanted to start me at the very bottom in PR on the music side, but making not very much money. And I thought, I'm not 19 at this point, and
they were asking you to go back. They were looking at you as like a college. Oh, we have a fresh college graduate who knows nothing, this, that, and the other thing. And you had already started scaling a career. Absolutely. And I got to give you an enormous amount of credit. You own the value that you were coming with and refused to compromise on that. And that's a strong woman to do that.
Well, I had to, because in the
and in New York just demands you do that.
Well, exactly. And I remember having those very honest conversations in the interviews, just saying, I understand your position that I've never worked in the music industry, but at the same time, I do have this work background that does have value. And if we can't see eye to eye on that, I can't take this job. And so I decided to go to a headhunter that focused on the music industry. She took a look at my resume and I had to take the typing test. And so when she saw that I typed 100 plus words a minute and with my resume, she said, oh no, you're going to finance. I want to send you to finance. JP Morgan, and this before it was JP Morgan Chase, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs are hiring. And I was like, finance, that's not what I do. I'm here to work on the creative side of the music industry or film somewhere, but not finance, not Wall Street. I have no predisposition for that at all. And she said, I think you do. And so she said, I'll make a deal with you. If you go and get a job, if I send you out and they want to hire you, you stay for 2 years. If you have a Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan on your resume for 2 years, you'll be able to write your ticket in this town. And I said, okay, not thinking that it was going to happen, but I said, okay, I'll take you up on it. JP Morgan wouldn't see me because they thought that I was too, I don't know, they just didn't think I was the right fit. They felt like I was too advanced because it was for an assistant position, administrative assistant position. But Goldman Sachs did see me. And before I got back I was staying with my cousins. I had only been here for about 2 weeks. And I was staying with my cousin in the North Bronx. Before I could get from Wall Street back to her place, she said, oh, this headhunter called and said Goldman Sachs wants to see you again tomorrow. I thought, oh, wow, 2 weeks in New York City. And I was like, oh, wow.
Unheard of, just FYI.
For sure, now for sure. And I just thought, oh, wow, this is happening quickly. So long story short, they hired me and I was miserable for the first 3 months because I felt like I had given up on my dream. I said,
you compromised.
I absolutely felt like I compromised, but I was making good money. So on that end, I could afford to live and I could afford to, quickly get my own place. But I felt like, I could have stayed in DC if this is what I was going to do. I didn't need to move to New York to do this. But after 3 months of sort of licking my wounds, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm in this place now at Goldman Sachs. Everyone seems to be, because I knew nothing about Wall Street. Everyone seems to be very impressed by the fact that I'm at Goldman Sachs. So let me really kind of lean into this and figure out where it is that I am and figure out even more so how to make this work. And so once I did that, I said, okay, I'm in a really good space. I'm very blessed to be here. Let me make the most of this. It's okay that my dream is taking a little bit of a deferral, right? I'm here. Let me look and see what determines success at Goldman Sachs. And so it was at that time that I really focused on learning not just what my job was, but learning about Goldman Sachs within the environment of the financial industry, but also understanding how what I was doing worked within the organization, within the corporation. And once I understood that, I was able to sort of do these shifts in thinking, how can I progress in what I want to do from this point? Yes, I'm an administrative assistant in investment banking, but surely there's a corporate communications department in this company, in this big global company. And so I literally, at that time, they had what was called the Goldman Sachs Global Directory. And I went on the directory and I just typed in communications, corporate communications. Peter Rose's name came up. I called him blindly. He had never met.
Oh my goodness. You were touching my heart with guts. It's simple common sense. And, now today it's like, hey, you see this, check it out on LinkedIn, do your research, see who you know, how do you connect? And, you had the guts and the forethought and you went for it.
Yeah, I did. I called him. I introduced myself. I said, can I come down and speak to you just briefly? I won't take up much of your time. I'm interested in what you guys are doing on the 7th floor. And he said, sure. So we set up the time to talk. I took him my resume and I said, look, even if you don't have anything available today, I'm patient. I'm brand new to this industry. I'm still figuring it out. But I doubt very seriously that you're going to find many people like me who have a degree in public relations, corporate communications with a focus on public relations. So I'm ready when you are. And he had to explain to me, he said, well, we're a very small department. I don't know when we're going to have something available, but I'll keep you in mind. And sure enough, true to
all
his
the
word,
typical things we think sounds like, yeah, get out of here, you're out.
no, he really did put his money where his mouth was. He stayed in touch with me. He would say hello to me whenever we saw one another. How's it going? How are you doing? And
I also bet you stayed in touch with him.
We did. We became colleagues, so to speak. And about a year later, he called me out of the blue and said, I think we got something. It's not in the media relations area, but it's in Corp Com on the advertising side. I said, advertising? I know nothing about advertising, not as someone who works in it. He said, I think you can figure it out. I said, you know what? You're correct. I will. You give me the shot. I will take it and I will run with it. And he did. I met with John F.W. Rogers, who, as I say to people, was on the letterhead or is on the letterhead at Goldman Sachs. He was the chief of staff to Hank Paulson at that point, who was the CEO of Goldman Sachs Global. And I had to have this interview with him, which lasted all of 10 minutes. I thought he heard nothing I said. He asked questions as he stared at his computer and typed on the 3 monitors. He was monitoring the markets as we were speaking. And within days, I heard from David May, who would be my boss, who said, I hear from John F.W. Rogers that you're someone I need to have on my team. And that's how it happened. But what was really significant about that is very seldom did someone go into Goldman or lots of companies on one track and be able to switch to another track. So I went in on the administrative side and I was able to switch to the management side. So that was significant about the move that I had made.
So we need to jump forward, okay? Because we need to talk about the opening and founding of your company, right? Mm-hmm. Squire Media and Management. Mm-hmm. You opened the doors in 2008. Let's go back to Gilda the woman with guts and ambition, because it does take that to go out and open a door to a company. What was the precipice that said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this now?
So I left Wall Street and went into publishing, and I'd been in publishing and done very well for about 5 or 6 years. And in that time, I felt like one of the things that I learned working at Goldman is the relationship building, the client relationship is always number one. And so I took that basic but important principle to my work in publishing, but it was difficult to do because when you work in-house in publishing, you're working on 6, 7, 8 titles at the same time. You're working on what's out now, what came out and is still going from 3 months before, and you're working on what's coming out 5, 6 months from now. And so I felt like while I did my best, I wasn't really able to give the books the time and attention that I felt they deserved. And so after, 6, 7 years, it was actually 6, 7 years of this, I decided to go out on my own because I knew that if I go out on my own, I then am in control of how much time I can give and really come up with strategic plans to benefit these books in a way that I couldn't do in-house.
So in pulling it together, okay, because there's the concept. Mm-hmm. And then there's, okay, I'm going to open a business and I'm going to create revenue. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to pay my bills, pay myself. Going from concept to actual. How'd you do it?
So
because I have to tell you, your client base, everybody's like, oh, Ivy, you can't wait to interview Gilda because, she works with Misty Copeland and we know you used to love dance, this, that, and the other thing. I was like, yes, absolutely. And then I'm like, Angela Bassett, oh my God,
So it goes back to that networking, right? That I didn't really understand I was doing at 16 years old. It goes back to the importance of the networking and doing the work. One thing I will say about me and my career is no matter where I've been, I have always put in the time, and more often than not, the overtime, to really understand my business, to understand my role in the business, and to really understand who the various players are. And not just from a superficial standpoint of, oh, I only want this from you, so I'm connecting with you because of it. I really am genuinely interested in people and getting to know people. The woman who booked me on your show, Ivy, Kelly Ryan, is someone who I got to work with because of my work with Misty Copeland. And we've continued that relationship for the better part of 12 years, I think it is now. So that's really how I approach my business. I look at my universe of contacts, I put in the work. And so when I was ready to go into business, it was not that difficult. My first client was my job, HarperCollins. They gave me, I think it was 2 books. And so HarperCollins was my very first client.
And that is so smart and so opportunistic and not unusual.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so, listeners, lean into this. Very often, the place you're working for values you so that they will continue to use your skill sets and compensate you differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And other authors like Mickey Taylor, who I'd worked with in the past, she happened to have a TV One, the network, new show coming. And so she said, oh, I'd love to hire you to work with TV One to help launch this show. And so that launched me into the TV space, through friends who are friends of friends. That's how I got the opportunities with the studios for media training opportunities, right? So going to somebody like Angela Bassett and Courtney B. Vance, ironically, it was through my work with Misty Copeland, who I met Courtney B. Vance when she was inducted into the Boys and Girls Hall of Fame in 2012. And he happened to be the MC because he's also an alum, and he happened to be the MC. And so it was through Misty and meeting him at that event, and Frank Sanchez at the Boys and Girls Club, where Courtney and I got connected. And it just so happened that I found out that Courtney was going to be starring in Terminator Genesis. And I thought, he needs to be doing media. I don't see very much happening with Courtney. So I called him and I said, hey, I would love to do some work with you to really optimize and amplify your role in Terminator Genesis. And he said, okay. I hadn't really thought about that. And so that's how that was born in 2015, which led into the People versus O.J. Simpson in 16, which then he said, you've got to work with my wife. And so I started working with Angela Bassett in 2018, right when Black Panther, the first Black Panther, was in theaters.
So what's the vision? What's next for you? What's the vision for the company? What's the vision for yourself?
The vision for the company is just continued growth. I'm always looking at, the markers of, okay, I've been in business now for 15 years. What is it that I would like to do that I haven't already done? And I've got to be really honest with you, Ivy. I am so grateful to be in the position that I'm in, to have been on the journey with Misty Copeland, which I never dreamed that I would be working with a ballerina. That was completely by chance, and her needing me at that time. And quite frankly, me needing her, not just from a career or professional standpoint, but just needing to breathe some life into what I was doing. I was looking to do something different in 2011, and Black Swan happened to be the thing that was on everybody's lips. And I said, well, this woman has this incredible story. I've never heard of her, but she could use my help. I had no idea I was going to be managing her. She asked me to manage her because she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, which is often the case. That's
very true. Others see things in us that we do not see in ourselves. And that's been a huge impact for me growing Slater Success as well. But I'm going to say hats off to you to be open to it. So many often, so let's call a spade a spade. Many often people look at it as like, oh my goodness, you should do this. I see, they see us differently than when we look in a mirror and see ourselves. But there's only so many people who actually lean into that and say, let me explore this opportunity. What do they actually see? Is this marketable? What can I do with this? And Gilda, you are that person who has truly opened your heart and your mind and built from there.
And I do everything from my heart. I really do. And that's the wonderful position that I'm in, having my own business. I tell people all the time, if you do it with your heart, if you throw your heart and your mind and your spirit into it, the money will come. The money will come. The additional opportunities will come. And that's been my philosophy, truly. And so to be in a position now on this historic journey with Angela Bassett, where do you go after all of this? Where do you go? I think about that often these days, as we're looking at a potential Oscar nomination tomorrow. Where else do I go from here? And the truth is, there's always more interesting people and products and campaigns to work on. I just had a conversation this morning with another potential author client who I'm very excited about. So it's limitless. And that's another thing that I tell people who are thinking about getting into business. The beautiful gift in having your own business is that it's limitless what you can do if you're open to it.
Well, Gilda, I cannot thank you enough. This is your pearls of wisdom. May they continue to ripple through the Her Success Story community and the Slater Success community, because they are pearls of wisdom, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Make sure to follow Gilda. Okay, check her out on LinkedIn. Your website is?
GildaSquire.com.
Okay, everything is in the show notes, listeners, so do not panic. Did I get the spelling? Ivy did not spell it. Gilda did not spell it. Yes, it's on the link below. Just click. Reach out, connect. Use the value of this conversation today to truly grow your network, hone your network, feed your network, and love your network. And Gilda, I love that we had this opportunity today.
I do as well. Thank you so much, Ivy.
As we close, remember to feel free. If this episode meant something to you and you think it would mean something to somebody else, share it forward. Hit subscribe. We come into your inbox with fresh content, amazing interviews like Gilda today, every Monday morning. Hit subscribe and we'll be coming to you. See you next time on Her Success Story.